man, the lawyers did very well. Not that that's a surprise, but they get 35% of the settlement, which means a fee of $276.5 million. And, that's standard, or we'll ask Dan Lust if the actual percentage is standard, but they did a heck of a job. I mean, they earned their money. But again, so the $790 million payment is not really going to be the full payment, obviously, that total for the litigants. So the attorney's fees are pretty steep, to say the least. But I don't have a problem with that. And how could I? Dan Lust is an attorney. I can't turn on attorneys. He joins us now. You can follow him on Twitter at SportsLawLust, and you hear him on ESPN, Sirius XM, CBS, Fox Sports. He is a sports law professor at New York Law School. He hosts the very informative and entertaining Con Detrimental podcast. You can follow that on Twitter at Con Detrimental. And he joins us now. It's been a while, but that doesn't mean that we haven't followed and respected his work all along. Dan, sorry for the long-winded intro. How are you doing, sir?
No, the intro is always appreciated, Bernie. I'm doing very well, and certainly some big news on the Rams relocation front. I can give you a little bit of insight, at least to the normal contingency, and maybe not the most exciting conversation, but obviously it varies state by state. But I'm happy to. You can pick my brain wherever you want to take the conversation.
Well, I wanted to just dive in where you came in on this. Not came in on this, but like one of your first statements about it, and I'm going to read it to people. And again, they should go to your Twitter feed right now at SportsLawLust. But Dan wrote on his Twitter account, quote, St. Louis was on the verge of trial in front of a St. Louis judge and jury about a case where the NFL allegedly stole a team from St. Louis. STL held the cards. $790 million is a ton, but disappointing to the public to cash in without an expansion team and without sticking it to the NFL. I hear what you're saying, but I still think it's pretty impressive what they were able to pull off, given that the NFL has been almost invincible along these lines on these type of cases for as long as I can remember. So, but I do understand the disappointment. But how would you address that part? What would you tell fans who were expecting a lot more?
Well, I read your piece on it this morning, Bernie, and I know you've probably been mentioning it on the show, but certainly everyone should check it out. I think at least the way I view this, right, I speak on Twitter to the fans, right? I'm not speaking to, Bob Blitz and the law firm, right? They have a very different calculus. But for the fans' perspective, I think the priorities were 1A and 1B in some order, if you can tell me which people feel. But an expansion team was maybe, number 1 or 1A, and 1B, maybe vice versa, was a public trial where Kroenke and all the NFL owners could get called out. I certainly think the public trial was within the grasp. I think that was certainly very realistic. I still do think there was a world post-verdict where potential settlement, if you really had the NFL in a really tough position, I think an expansion franchise was doable. Obviously, they've done that with the Cleveland Browns once upon a time and the Houston Texans. But yeah, I mean, that was maybe a pipe dream, but it was still certainly out there. And the public trial was close. We're only 30 days away. So, once you don't get number 1 and number 2, the fans don't get to see. I know our mutual friend, we have some mutual friends saying, of the $790 million, or maybe it's like $550, once you take out the lawyer's fees, but that, 500 million fans should each get $1 million, right? But that's the joke, because none of the money is going to the fans. So if you're a fan and you're sitting here and you're like, well, it's a lot of money, but I feel kind of empty. Like, why didn't I feel more satisfied with this? Because you didn't get number 1 and 2, right? Public trial or an expansion team. So I certainly see that. I think the lawyers obviously did a tremendous job. They've been on this case for 4 years, and they're entitled to their fee. With some states, contingencies as high as 45%. I know in New York, where I'm from, it's a third is the highest you can get. 35, I believe, is the highest in Missouri. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of standard, right? Those guys didn't get paid a dime for 4 years, so that's why you take the case on a contingency. And if the recovery happens to be a lot, so be it. But good faith on them that they took the case without getting paid a dime for 4 years. Not, most firms don't take cases on a contingency basis for that reason. You lose, you get zero. So yeah, I think the firm did a fantastic job, but I still think fans are certainly allowed to be upset.
I get it. I do. I just still think in the end, it's a win for St. Louis. And there's a vindication here, and there's the NFL not officially admitting wrongdoing, but if you're going to give the aggrieved party, close to $800 million, you're admitting something. Maybe you just feared losing the suit. But I wanted to ask you this: why do you think? And Dan, I'm not asking you to be a mind reader, so in a way, it's an unfair question. I don't mean it that way, but why do you think then? Because your points are well taken. Why do you think then that the attorneys and the litigants that they represent, why do you think they did settle this close to trial? There must have been something that compelled them to do that. I don't know if it was anxiety over something or just wanting to eliminate risk. I don't know what it might be, but you could at least theorize what it could be. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so certainly. I think objectively the St. Louis had all the momentum here and they had all the leverage. And cases, which I've said all along, 99% of cases settle for a reason. But, sometimes they settle on the courthouse steps. And why is that? Because the closer you get to that decision day is when you have to put on a case, you have to prep for trial. There's certainly a world, and I read the reports last week that this mediation was going to be the last attempt to settle this case. I read it. I don't know if I bought it, but, imagine a check could have been cut on January 9th, January 8th, January 7th, right before the trial date. But if the NFL really said that, they said, listen, we're going to give you our best and final offer. It's not going to get better than this because we are about 45 days away from trial. We need to prep for trial. So we're either settling it today or it doesn't get settled. I think that's probably the mode that the NFL took. I've been in, mediations where that was said. Maybe you don't believe it. Maybe you call their bluff. But from a risk tolerance perspective, this was a case where billions were being considered with a B. I'll stand by that in our calculus because a case doesn't get settled for $800 million unless billions are at stake. And, for the lawyer's perspective, they didn't want to walk away with zero. So certainly I think they're always considering settlement. What changed? I'm not really sure, right? Unless the NFL really said that there was no more money coming to this. We're either going to contribute right now altogether, the NFL and the RAMS, whatever that breakdown would be, or we're not settling the case. That's, I think, how this case gets done. So certainly I think if they could possibly have waited into January, right, into December, as we got closer to trial, they could have got a better number. But if you believe the NFL that they weren't going to contribute anymore, which is what I think probably happened in that room, that's a reason the deal gets cut within 24 hours of the mediation occurring.
Well, that's interesting, and that's very plausible what you said. But a follow-up to that, and Dan Lust is our guest, sports attorney Dan Lust, and again, follow him on Twitter at I lost your page there. What's the Twitter handle again, Dan? I apologize.
It's Sports Law Lust. Lust, the opposite of love. It's hard to forget.
The follow-up question is, and you can not only educate and enlighten me, but some of our listeners. But okay, let's say St. Louis goes to trial and they win. We know the NFL would appeal. What would that process have been like? In other words, number one, how long would something like that last, and how many levels would it go through? That's number one. And number two, what would have been the risk of the damages being knocked down to a much lower figure during this process? And if I said anything stupid during that question, you can correct me. I take no offense, but please talk us through that two-part question.
Yeah, Bernie, you always say you ask stupid questions. You ask great questions. That was a very good question. I can explain it perfectly. I don't need any clarification. So here's the thing, right? I think the biggest issue up on appeal that we flagged, which I think people outside of St. Louis also flagged, is the obvious one, that this case is being tried in the city of St. Louis in front of a St. Louis jury. That was an issue that would have certainly gone up on appeal. And sometimes cases, not to get too political, but there were issues, and there still are issues to potentially appeal on the Rittenhouse case and some other big cases that we don't necessarily need to get into. But those cases take years, right? Years to go through. And you really have to find some type of egregious error that changed the nature of the case. It wasn't just a slight mistake, but an error reading the jury instructions. Maybe, a juror had some type of misconduct. It was like a plant to kind of screw over the NFL, right, and post something on Facebook after the fact. We've had cases like that happen across the country. So that process would have taken years, but if you had to put odds on it, right, you have to, and I know your listeners, and I'm a betting man, right, you put a minus in front of that. You have to think that the NFL wins on appeal, unless there's something truly egregious that happened. We're kind of playing, Monday morning quarterback, so to speak, or kind of forecasting what could have happened. But you have to think that the party that wins at the trial court level still has feels really good about their chances. And that's the world where I thought the best case scenario was for the NFL to potentially get an expansion franchise. Once the ink was dry on a potential very large verdict, they have the leverage, right? It's not fictitious, right? They're basically one win on appeal away from having that judgment confirmed and collecting a big payday. That's the world I always thought that expansion, if it was going to happen, it was going to happen there in that window. But yeah, I mean, it could have taken years, who knows, but I would have liked St. Louis's chances. But again, that big issue on appeal would have been, at least in my estimation, the underlying decision to have the case tried in St. Louis. That issue was still up on appeal last we checked. Decision hadn't been rendered, but now certainly a moot point, all things considered.
Our friend Dan Lust, sports attorney based in New York. And again, check out his podcast. It's really good. And the best way to do that is follow him on Twitter at SportsLawLust. And he will link to that, but it's also in his bio at Con Detrimental. At Con Detrimental is the podcast. All right, I wanted to ask you this, and again, this is one of those unfair questions because you don't have the answer because the information really hasn't leaked out. But again, I'm asking you to almost speculate or take a stab at it anyway. How much do you think Kroenke will be responsible? What percentage of this $790 million is going to kind of be shoved to him, and the league will say, okay, now this part's your problem, So what? And he already indicated he would push back against something like that based on that. He doesn't think the indemnity agreement would hold. But my point is, do you think maybe Kroenke and the league or the fellow owners they came to accord in advance, or this wouldn't have happened unless they did, or do you think he's still going to get stuck with a big part of the bill? And again, it's all speculative, but that's the best I can do right now.
Yeah. So here's an interesting thing that was playing on behind the scenes. Certainly, Bernie, there was a world last week where Stan Kroenke, it was reported that he was threatening to settle the case solo without the NFL. And that's, that I think was certainly a world that was possible. If that would have occurred, St. Louis would have gone to trial against the NFL. And if the NFL lost, again, without Kroenke in the picture, they then could have turned around and sued Stan Kroenke for the remainder of that money. So that issue was never going to be decided if Stan Kroenke settled solo. That issue, the indemnification, is still floating out there. In my reading of this indemnification agreement, which Ben Fredrickson, our mutual friend, posted online last week, what is a hold harmless and indemnification agreement? If you didn't tell me anything else, I would assume that covers all costs and all damages. That's what this clause was called, a hold harmless agreement, which means, plain English, you hold the other person harmless from any harm, right, from any type of harm that could be incurred from a financial perspective. So that's the general meaning of hold harmless agreements. Now, if you go through this agreement, it doesn't really say the word damages. It says including costs, which I think is interpreted to mean legal spend. I think Kroenke's got a puncher's chance here, but I think at the end of the day, right, the general meaning of hold harmless covers everything. That said, if people disagree with me, it's fine. I think I've seen 50-50 on this. Some people believe it, some people don't. But at the end of the day, if you read this indemnification clause, Roger Goodell, of all people, conveniently gets to decide. He's the final determiner of who wins this agreement, who wins this dispute, whether Kroenke or the 31 NFL owners. And which side Goodell is going to come down on. So Kroenke could kick and scream. I think there's a very high likelihood. I'll put a fake number on it just because I got to answer the question. I'd say there's probably an 85 to 90% chance that Kroenke fits almost all, if not the lion's share, of this bill. I mean, it's going to come down to Goodell and what side is he going to side on, right? He's got utilitarianism on his side, right? He's going to go with the 31 over the 1. So I think Kroenke is going to be stuck footing the bill here. That's my opinion. No,
you sussed that out very well. Makes perfect sense. Well, Dan, I think that's all I got for you, man. Unless I've overlooked something you'd like to address, and you have the floor if you do. But it's been great dealing with you through this, and you've helped us understand things along the way.
No, I certainly appreciate it. I want to give a big shout out to all my new friends in the city of St. Louis. When you and I first started speaking, Bernie, I really, we hadn't fully dove into this case, but we really wanted to make this a national issue, a national story, and then, maybe unrelated to us, but certainly the Los Angeles Times picked it up, ESPN picked it up, Front Office Sports, Yahoo Sports. This became a really big story in the last 3-4 months, and obviously today is front page news across the national landscape of the settlement. And I'm a little disappointed that we didn't get to see a trial on this. It would have really put a nice spotlight on St. Louis, and kind of the plight of the Rams. And there are teams, other jurisdictions, be it Oakland, with the Oakland Athletics, that are potentially going to move soon. Even the Buffalo Bills, there was a report that they might move to Austin, Texas. But we're really not going to see what went on behind the scenes. And I think that's the real loss here for the fans, right? Maybe they needed a full public trial, but I think they wanted to know what went on behind the scenes, and we don't get those answers. So I'm a little disappointed, but I appreciate all the love and support from my new friends in St. Louis. We'll continue to keep everyone posted on this indemnification agreement. I'm sure people aren't too sad to see Kroenke getting hit with a nine-figure potential award over here.
Yeah, I think I'll sleep okay tonight. You're right. But hey, Dan, happy holidays to you and your loved ones. And I'm sure we'll be talking again relatively soon, because this thing's not exactly 100% at rest, and we got some loose ends to tie up. And there's always going to be other sports issues that require a good, keen, sharp legal mind like yours anyway. So it's been good. I'm going to come right back at you. It's been very good to get to know you, and hope we have other matters to discuss on the air. And if you have something that make an interesting topic on the show, hit me up, man. We'll talk. Appreciate you very much.
We'll talk Steven Matz at a later time. Bernie, have a lovely holidays.
There you go, man. That's right.
Soon.
All right, take care. That's sports attorney Dan Lust. He's great, and I've enjoyed getting to know him a little bit. So is Matt Rocchio there? Well, of course he is, but I just wanted to make sure he was.
No, you're on your own.
Sink or swim. That's right. Well, what do you think? I mean, I understand where Dan Lust is coming from. So he's disappointed that he didn't have the trial. I understand his thinking there, but I still. When we talked about it and when we kind of followed up and got into it a little bit, he did. I'm glad that he brought up the fact that, once this thing goes to appeal, if it would have gone to appeal, if there had been a jury verdict in St. Louis's favor, that then it just gets tangled up for a long time and you don't really know what's going to happen. And, I read some outside legal opinions on this during this process. And it wasn't someone trying. It's about 2 or 3 pieces, and they weren't trying to get clicks. I mean, it was very measured. There was a lot of legalese. I mean, it's not exactly stuff that would get, passions, set passions aflame. But the takeaway was basically, look, it really looks good for St. Louis now, but the NFL, really has another pretty big card to play, which is when they take it to the appellate level, which. Will strip St. Louis of what is perceived to be a home field advantage, and so don't rush to conclusions about how this will turn out. And that was one of the reasons why again I've been a little more cautious than some about assuming things, and I understand where Dan's coming from, and I respect him, and I understand why fans are disappointed. I guess I'm just saying don't be too disappointed. I mean, the immediate aftermath, there's going to be some disappointed people who are craving a trial and thought it would have opened up more wounds in the NFL, revealed more things. I don't know how much more could have been revealed. I mean, these attorneys dug in and turned up plenty of dirt. I mean, plenty of embarrassing stuff. But we'll never know. And I still think that, other than the Davis trial, and I think the players' settlement, retired player settlement over the concussion issue, I think that's a whole separate issue because the league did pay up pretty big on that. But actually, if you ask me, the league got off lightly there. I mean, because, obviously they turned the other way on concussions and were slow to recognize it and the damage that concussions cause to the brains of these players. And even when they were presented with evidence, they tried to push back on it at first and still insisted that one had nothing to do with the other. So everyone will say, like, well, boy, that settlement almost got to $1 billion. Well, I once again, sincerely, I think that's just this entirely different kind of lawsuit. So I don't really include it when we talk about the times the NHL's really been hit hard. So this one here in St. Louis, I mean, is one of the hardest hits, if not the hardest hit the league's ever taken. Other than maybe if you want to be technical, when the retired players, filed a class action suit, basically. So anyway, I'm rambling now. So if you got something to say, please do. So I'll shut up for a minute.
Yeah, it's just, again, that's why I thought the Exxon example earlier was just so perfectly emblematic of how this can go. And I honestly, just again, the fact now that we can always look back and say the city of St. Louis was able to get more from the NFL than society was from Exxon destroying the environment is insane on spec in the first place. But I mean, that's what you got to look at. The fact they were able to get almost $800 million when the money being thrown around in the conversations of worst case scenario was $2 billion or $4 billion. I think that in the case of the legalese and in the world of lawsuits and settlements and those kind of things, I think Dan Lusk kind of put it out there that's not a bad number when you consider it right. A pretrial settlement. And again, some people want to call out St. Louis and call out the politicians for failing to take the risk of trial because they cared more about blood, but I guess it's not shocking, and some people may take this in a very, very nihilistic or cynical tint when I say this. But clearly the politicians cared more about bringing the money to St. Louis than they did that slim margin or that more cosmetic, outcome. But again, some people, like I said, are going to hear that and say, yeah, because they want to pocket that money or, do some boondoggles with it or, fund more trolleys or whatever joke is trending right now about St. Louis politicians getting the money. But maybe there is some actually positive thoughts there, hopefully.
I agree, and we'll see how it all starts to play out. But I'm sure, unfortunately, we're going to have more controversy on the way. It's just it's not going to go away as we know already. I mean, it's just so obvious. So it was really good to have Dan Lusk on. What a really terrific guy too. So he breaks things down very well.